Structure of an education module, considerations for the planning process. Next, we are going through a few things that you need to remember to consider when planning a training or education session. When you are giving a readily prepared education session, you still need to take different things into account before you will give the education. You need to take the participants' amount into account, their motivation, their prior learning and knowledge, as well as their learning preferences and strategies. You will also need to plan where to keep the education, the kind of facility you will have, and the kind of equipment and support materials you will need. And for example, how long it takes to get from one place to another. When you give out materials and handouts, you need to consider where you can print those and how to distribute them. Many developers plan the education session and the tasks and assignments depending on the prior knowledge of the participants and the location where the education is held. They prepare their slides ready prior to the education, and they prepare what they will do and how they will do it. The best developers also plan for how the to-be-learned materials are best taught. They plan the key points, think about explanations, possible questions, and their answers. They think how topics and issues are connected to each other and how they start and finish the education parts. The better you plan, the better you will be able to support the participants in their learning, and you will be able to concentrate on the reactions of the participants, because you do not need to think about what and how you will teach. On this slide, you see a checklist for developers that you can go through to be able and ready to execute an effective education session. The first point is to check what the goal for learning is. The goals for learning should be worded as follows. At the end of this session, you will know, you will be able to do, you will understand. The goals should also be measurable at the end of the education session. It is a good idea to show the goals on a slide or a flip chart, which is visible for the duration of the course, so it's easy to return to it at the end of the education session. The next thing is to check for learning before you go deeper into the matter. Think how and when you will check for learning. Usually this is done towards the end of the education session. There are several ways to do this. For example, you can do a quick correct or false quiz. Or they have to tell a 60-second long short story to their colleague. They have to come up with a 5-word summary. Each one has to pick the 3 most important things from the course for themselves. Or they have to pick the 2 most interesting things. Finally, you can finish with a question to ponder on, and so forth. Think also how each participant will be able to achieve their learning goals. You should still take care that not too much new information and knowledge is shared in one go. Next, you also need to think about how you check or will get to know about the experiences of the participants, their skill and knowledge level. This is important so you will be able to adjust the level of the course to the one of the participants. You also need to think about how and when the participants get to practice. Practice should mimic and be as close to reality as possible. In the feedback part, you need to think how the coach will receive quality feedback on their doing, how they will get peer-reviewed feedback, and at what point you as the educator will give feedback. Think also how you describe and explain the tasks that you give to the participants and what kind of questions you will ask. Through the questions, you will display the thinking processes and thoughts of the participants. For example, questions that can be answered with yes or no will not give insight into the learning, and you will not know what kind of thoughts and thought processes are going on in the participants' heads. It is good to think about and plan the questions beforehand, so you will be able to keep the learning effective and the learning environment positive. A good way to ask questions is, please explain how you came up with this solution. This is a better way than asking, why do you do this way? Why questions can have a negative vibe to them. Transitions. This is an important point because it connects information and materials from a previous part with the new materials, and how this education part is complementing previous education parts, and how the coach can apply and use it. Plan also how you execute the transitions. Finally, check that all LEARN's principles have been taken into consideration in the education part. On the following slide, we are going even deeper into the LEARN's principles. The first letter L stands for learner-centered. Here we ponder on how good the education part is taking learner-centered principles into account, how well you are able to consider the different learners, their background and needs. The letter E stands for environment. How well have you planned to have a positive environment? Is there enough variety in the education part? Is it challenging so that it will keep interests of the participants high? The next letter A stands for actively involved, meaning, are the learners actively involved in their own learning? Are they challenged to think, learn, discuss, apply and find solutions? Are conversations and discussions also happening between the participants? How can you make sure that they think and act like coaches for most of the time? R, as in reflect. At what point and how do you give the learners the possibility to reflect? Have you planned with what kind of questions you can support reflection? How will the learners get feedback and when? N as in new information. When providing new information, have you thought about the fact if your information is new information to the participants? With what means do you provide the new information? Have you considered the possibility that the information is known to some participants and totally new to others? And the last letter S as in stretch. Finally, you should plan for and be prepared to ascertain through the application of different means and techniques that each participant was challenged during the education and was compelled to get out of their comfort zone, but still not faced with a too big a challenging or even threatening situation. How are they able to experience successful situations and grow their self-esteem? To develop as a coach developer, it is important to set goals for yourself to improve your own developer skills. When you are preparing and training your education sessions by yourself, remember that the execution of the actual education session will take about 3 to 4 times as long.